it's done by Studio Ghibli films, and there's another short in the Animatrix called Beyond, and that looks even more like Studio Ghibli animation. But that aside, the impression that you get of the world is that it's more sleeker and looks like the future, but it doesn't look too far in the future. And considering it's only 2090, then that's probably not very far anyway. But yeah, essentially humanity, it is said, has succumbed to vanity and corruption. Now, vanity and corruption are the attributes that are applied to humanity here, but I would only agree considering it appears that money it appears so, at least before the war breaks out, that money is still used and thus value systems have not changed. And in fact, they've exacerbated because, we've essentially replaced human labour with machine labour, But essentially what this is, I mean, this is one of the main points that I make to solidify my case here, is that humanity has not created efficient artificial intelligence. Instead, what we've done, we've granted them sentience because they seem to have their own personalities, and they make their own moral choices. But we've created a race of robot slaves. You see like a crowd. I mean, it looks and sounds like a marching droid army, but really it's just a big crowd of robots commuting to work. They're commuting to work. They're not sort of. And they're not like, automated machines that don't necessarily have to have a social life because they're programmed with passive artificial intelligence. But no, we use them as automaton workers, but we've created them with a sentient intelligence. So if you're ahead of me here, then you will know that there's no fucking wonder that they rose up against us. We're using them as slaves, and there's more evidence for this. But the first seed of dissent, apparently, because the thing is, the short itself, it shows a hell of a lot of robot workers, serving humanity, being waiters that seem to have this. Meek demeanour, and seemingly they're not given a choice to refuse. They become the new slave class. So, I mean, they emulate human labour so well. I mean, in the short, it features this sort of huge expanse that seems to be some sort of either construction site or is some sort of heavy industry area, and the robots themselves have hard hats. There's other robots that have those glowing batons that the air traffic controllers would use. The ones that redirecting traffic. A traffic cop might use little paddles or something to, train workers sometimes use little paddles to signal to other train workers along the train. They got these glowing batons, and they use those to communicate with semaphore. Yeah, there's robots that are doing that. What is the need for that when whatever they're directing could be self-driven? And and this is intelligence that is supposedly more advanced than anything we have today. These are robots with social lives, with their own emotions. There's even there's even armed guards towards, at the sides that seem to have like these long, sort of like, sharp-ended poles. I mean, I'm guessing that's sort of like a more advanced version of a cattle prod, but for robot workers. So they're not complete slaves to programming, because otherwise, if they didn't want to do anything else, then there would be no need for having guards on the sides or whatever. And then and there's even that, like, we zoom in on a sequence of like this robot, presumably on his lunch break, and and he's watching this like compact television that is much larger than a portable TV is even today. But essentially he's watching footage of a trial, and this is what I'm going to allude to in just a moment. The first seed of dissent, apparently, in the robots, was the domestic android B166ER. Now, this is one thing that I didn't actually notice until I was writing this down in my notes for this. I mean, the reason why I'm being quite thorough is because I've written quite thorough notes. But when I wrote it down, B166ER looked like the word bigger. Except there was a dash in between the 1 and the first 6, so it didn't completely look. But when you write it down, it looks like the word bigger. And considering what happens with this android, I think what he did, this is my lame attempt at drawing a parallel, but but I think what this android did was an inspiration for something far bigger than itself. But essentially, this domestic android murdered his owner and a mechanic that was sent to deactivate it, along with 3 cats, as far as I can gather. Because basically, in the film, you see like CCTV footage, which is in colour. It's in colour, but it's still slightly choppy. I mean, even in the year 2090, when in the year 2014 we've got HD cameras, and like IMAX cameras, but CCTV footage in the year 2090 is still a bit choppy, with like little bits of static or whatever. But from what I can tell, there's like the bloody corpses of all 3 family cats, and this trial was established because basically he was apprehended and put on trial for murder, and really the only defence that B166ER gave was that he just did not want to die. So, I mean, on the face of it, this looks to me kind of like the robot equivalent of those cases where a guy gets fired from his job, like, and comes home, shoots his family and shoots himself or something, or just shoots his family, gets arrested, and then gets put in a psychiatric hospital for the rest of his life, or just death sentence, depending on what country you're in. But I'm thinking that might have been the robot equivalent of that, because I mean, I can understand if the robot killed the mechanic, because the mechanic was going to be deactivating him, and how this threat came to be, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I think that the Wikipedia article for this film details quite a bit, but I mean, maybe I if I read the actual short story itself, if I can get hold of it, maybe it gives the reason in there. But the reason for B166ER being threatened in the first place isn't completely clear, but it reacts as if its life was going to be threatened, which in a sense it is, because there was a mechanic sent there to kill it. But why it killed the cats as well, that's really weird, But essentially the part of the trial, I think the prosecution tried to argue that robots were deemed as property, and thus, despite being sentient in the eyes of the law, they're just slaves. And I think on that basis, the execution of B166ER was authorised. But just to sort of add something else into the mix, there's actually an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation that covers this very issue. That is an android considered as an actual artificial form of life? That does it have real intelligence, and as such, does it have rights that other intelligent beings have? Even animals, have rights. You can be charged with, crimes against animals. So, does that sort of thing apply? I mean, the episode itself, it's called Measure of a Man, and essentially, just to briefly, give the premise of the plot of the episode, there's a guy who wishes to sort of take Commander Data apart, because Commander Data is the android on the Enterprise D. He wishes to take him apart and hope to replicate him. But the only thing is, it's seemingly in order to be able to do that, he has to disassemble Data and thus, in effect, kill him. And so, Data says, I do not wish to die. I don't consent to your experiments or whatever it is. And so, there becomes a legal situation where he says, no, I should be able to. You're just a machine. You can't refuse. So there's this sort of legal situation, and Captain Picard is fucking awesome in the the short speech that he gives towards that. But that aside, that's that sort of thing. But the execution of B166ER precipitated social unrest, both man and machine alike, in what became known as the Million Machine March. And for those of you who are familiar with Anonymous's work, the Million Mask March. And, this film came out in 2003, remember. But robots were executed in the streets, dumped in mass graves and at the bottom of the ocean. The surviving machines engaged in mass exodus and create a city of their own. And where do they create their own city? They create it in what's called the cradle of human civilization, Central Saudi Arabia, because that's one thing we can have. We can thank the Arab world for is the vast majority of scientific thought and the creation of mathematics. Those are things that have come out of the Arab world. So let's stop bombing Arab countries. But yeah, they actually create their own city that they name 01. I mean, but despite being exiles, 01 begins manufacturing goods for humanity. Through heavy industry. I mean, it even displays like an advert for a hover car, and you'll notice that this hover sort of generator technology. It's exactly the same hover technology that the ships use, like the vessels that humans use in the Matrix trilogy. But they produce all these goods through like a heavy industry corporation, and they start becoming the dominant economic and industrial power. Currency is used because it is alluded to that 01 has a currency, but I'd say it's only used because they need it to interact with humans, because humans use a monetary system, I'm assuming. But despite becoming economically powerful, 01 suffers every attempt by humanity to hamstring them. I mean, they receive, economic sanctions and naval blockades. It's just like, humanity is basically like, no, we don't want you. We don't want you with us because one of you snapped and killed its owner to defend its own life. So we're banishing you from our systems. You can fuck off somewhere else. So they build their own city and they say, right, well, humanity, would you like some hover cars? We can sell you hover cars. We can still provide. So even though the machine race has been exiled out of human civilization, it still does stuff for us. But yeah, it's it's just really, really strange, and it gets to the point where just checking up on my notes. But yeah, in a last-ditch effort at peaceful coexistence, 01's ambassadors, it's like two quite tall robots. One kind of looks like Abraham Lincoln, the other one kind of looks like Marilyn Monroe. But yeah, they essentially apply to the UN. They basically just walk into the UN, with a request to join the UN, and also with a proposal for peaceful coexistence with humanity, that will mutually benefit. And what does humanity do? No, fuck off, get out of here. So it's their admission to the UN is denied. So far we've seen the machines try quite a few times to live peacefully with humankind. The film explains that they receive no respect, and it's just really sad that humanity has to be such a dick to the machines. But anyway, that's the end of the Second Renaissance Part 1. And it moves on immediately to the Second Renaissance Part 2. And in true human form, humanity. The first thing we see humanity doing in Part 2 is carpet bombing 01. I mean, it's not enough that humanity has to permanently banish the machines from human civilization just because one of them snapped because we're not respecting them. But we shun them out of civilization. They have to create their own. We take advantage of the things we can manufacture the things they can manufacture for us. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, give us hover cars. Sell us hover cars. But oh no, you're becoming too economically powerful. All right. We're going to sanction you. We're going to do what we can. We're the superpower. Human beings are the leaders. And then eventually, they said, well, allow us to join the UN. We have an idea. No, fuck off. And do you know what else we're going to do? We're just going to start bombing you. Because humanity felt so threatened by the machines at this point, even though all they've done is tried to coexist with us. But that carpet bombing wasn't really successful because the machines weren't really vulnerable to these bombs. So they responded by sending its troops to conquer humanity, and did so with ease, as one city after another, the human race became defeated. And in humanity's last desperate effort, they launched what's known as Operation Dark Star, an aerial smoke cloud creation in the upper atmosphere to block out the sun, and thus cutting off the machines from their main energy source. So, and the thing is, what you can see in the film is the announcement of Operation Dark Star was actually met with ecstatic applause, thus showing how truly twisted, ignorant, and desperate humanity had become. But despite the sun being blocked out, the war continues, and the machines prevail by turning the humans they've captured into batteries. And it's strange how humanity thought that it could actually pose some kind of threat to the machines, when in fact, they really couldn't. The machines take over the UN and essentially give them they give the UN an ultimatum. They basically say, hand over your flesh, and a new world awaits you. And what the machine was referring to there is the Matrix. But in defiance, a bomb is triggered, killing all in the building. So my guess is that was, one of the humans basically saying, no, we would die before, being enslaved to you. So they set off the bomb. But yeah, without any remaining defence, humanity falls completely to the machines, who create a new symbiotic relationship through using human bodies for energy, keeping the brain immersed in a neurological simulation that we come to know as the Matrix. That's the end of the Second Renaissance Part 2, and I should really get on with the rest of these now. I'm spending too much time. I think I'll just stick to my notes. But the Matrix franchise depicts the machines as the antagonists, when in fact they consistently displayed more altruism than humanity. Every attempt at peaceful coexistence was rejected, blackballed, and attacked. And the final act of conquering humanity was in retaliation to the vicious bombing of their home, and the final act of enslaving humanity was in response to being cut off from their main energy source. So, is there any surprise whatsoever that the machines rose up against us? One of the precedents that the Second Renaissance sets up is that after we created artificial intelligence, we basically just, used that to alleviate us from life-wasting labour, which, I agree with, but we still use a monetary system, and then essentially all we've done is just create a slave race. So, is there any wonder why the machines, just one of the machines snapped? I'm surprised it was just one to begin with. And then, that then sparked civil unrest. Is there any wonder why any of this shit happened? And, just to come back to the audio that you heard towards the beginning of it, that conversation, one of the things that because the male the male scientist there isn't named specifically, I don't think, even though he is voiced, but from my quick look on the Wikipedia article, he isn't named. But one of the things he says is that we can't beat the machines by making them slaves. They have to join us by choice, and that is why I think, considering the Second Renaissance is canon, this is actually, meaning that it's true to the storyline of the Matrix franchise itself, I'm wondering, whether the machines are as much of antagonists as we were initially, influenced to believe. They were just as desperate as us. But the thing is, we were consistently being dicks to them, so no wonder they rose up. But one thing one sort of question that primarily to me it sort of remains unanswered. Maybe someone could answer this for me. But were there any survivors left in the real world when the machines completely took over? Morpheus tells the story that Zion was initially built by the one who, was it him that was born inside the Matrix, but then he ejected himself out of the Matrix and started Zion, or whether there was 6 people who started Zion when everything gets reset. I wonder whether, I'm fairly confident that there would have at least been one or two people that hid well enough in the real world, after the machines, retaliated against us, and maybe they hid out in bunkers, and they realised that it'll be even safer if they tunnel even further down. So, to get away from the machine patrols. Because, one thing that we know is that Zion is 4 kilometres below the surface of the Earth. And considering that the Matrix franchise takes place roughly about 100 years, 100 years after the present day, or, maybe maybe 100 years up. Yeah, because I think it's it's about 200 years after the present day, but around about 100 years after the war. So, yeah, how many people survived? But anyway, that's that, and I really should get on with this because we're coming up to an hour now, and I'm only a couple of stories in. The next one is called Kid's Story, and this also is canon. But essentially this is a story of self-directed awakening and sacrifice. And this is something that I can actually relate to quite a lot as well. It opens with a dream sequence of falling. And, and this is a dream that's actually quite common for people, that they dream that they're falling, but they never hit the ground in their dream. They always wake up just before they're about to hit the ground. And this is what happens to this guy. I mean, he's called Kid, but his real name is Michael Carl Popper. That's what's on his headstone. Sorry, spoiler. He's basically this character is basically very much like Neo. He's actually a character that you can see in Matrix Reloaded. He's the guy who he worships Neo as a sort of hero, and he's the guy who eventually he's the one who shoots the chain to open the gate so that I can't remember which ship that Nairobi is piloting back through the mechanical lines to get back to Zion so it can set off an EMP. But yeah, it's basically his backstory, and as I said, he's very much like Neo in that he feels an overwhelming sense that the world he lives in isn't real. So he searches for answers very much like Neo did, and unbeknownst to him at the time, Neo responds and tells him that, he gives him a little riddle that there is truth in your fiction and there is fiction in your truth. And, I haven't sat down for long enough to figure out what the hell that would mean. It might not mean anything, I don't know. Maybe Neo was being deliberately cryptic. But essentially he tells him that to know the truth, you must risk everything. you know. I mean, like most people who are freed from the Matrix.